We begin in the news in Nigeria, where at the twilight of former President Buhari's administration, the Federal Ministry of Finance issued the 2023 Fiscal Policy Measures, which led to the Finance Act 2023 also being signed into law. President Tinubu has, however, signed 4 executive orders, essentially deferring or reversing some of the change introduced by the Finance Act 2023. The public and business would like to understand the import of these executive orders signed by the president and what it portends for the economy. Is it a repudiation of the economic policies of the immediate past administration, or is it a step in the right direction to enable businesses in Nigeria more productive and reduce overall tax burden for Nigerians? The government has also announced the constitution of a committee on fiscal policy and tax reforms. What is the expected role of this committee and its outcome? These questions we are going to find out from our guest this afternoon. And joining me on the Central now is Michael Ango, partner, Anderson, Nigeria. Glad to have you join us on the news.
Good morning, sir. Good day. Good noon.
All right, all right, it's nice to have you join us. Now, to facilitate understanding, what do the executive orders mean and how do they affect businesses and the ordinary Nigerians? So I'd like you to just break it down for us.
All right, thank you. I think let's start from, the process that led to the enactment of the Finance Act 2023 and the issuance of the Fiscal Policy Measures. I think those decisions that were taken at the very tail end of the last administration were taken in a hurried manner. And there was a lot of pushback from industry and, from stakeholders to say, look, if a regime or administration is on its way out, there are certain critical decisions that should have been left for the incoming government, especially since it was, the same party that was succeeding them. So it felt as though, they were trying to do some things to impose certain, decisions on the administration of President Bola Tinubu. So to that extent, I think it's a right step to have looked at the complaints, especially with the issue of, increase in excise rates, imposition of excise on things like single-use plastics, and also even the effective date of the Finance Act. I think a lot of people felt that there should have been greater consultation. People should have been given more time to digest some of these changes. So to that extent, I commend, these steps taken in signing the executive orders by His Excellency, the President. What this is going to do is that it's going to allow people to then sit down, discuss the issues and agree how we should proceed. Because essentially, whatever decisions government takes and then announces those decisions, whether by way of legislation or by way of administrative actions, they always impact, the ordinary man on the street, they impact businesses, manufacturing, and all of that. So if, for example, you have noticed in the last few months or in the last 1 year or so, you notice that the average Coke bottle that you buy has shrunk from a 60 cl pet Coke to a 50 cl pet Coke, and it has also become more expensive. Reason being that excise has now been imposed on non-alcoholic products. Whether, that I'm not saying that is wrong or right, but the point is that this excise that was imposed was done without significant collaboration or consultation with the industry, with the manufacturers. And the burden ultimately will be passed on to you and I, who will have to consume these products. So I think to that extent, this was the right move at this point in time. It also gives the government now the time to sit down and also then set its own agenda and then also implement its own policies in this regard.
All right, you said that consultations were not properly done, and you've also talked about the fact that it could be a stress on businesses. So we want to look at the reactions now. When you talk about the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, and the Telecommunication Operators of Nigeria and other industry groups who have actually come out to hail these changes, and they have suggested that it is a positive thing that is happening to their members as a result of these policies. But then if you have to look at it on the other hand, does this not mean that this would result into the loss of revenue for the government at a time when we expect that the country would be seeking various means to generate enough revenue to fund government expenditure and, of course, to drive the governance and every other expenses that are needed by government? So what do you think?
Two very good questions. The first is the reaction of the industry groups. I myself have read in the papers, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, as expected, NECA and Alton and the rest have all hailed it. And again, this buttresses the point that sufficient consultation was not taken. Sometimes, again, it's not just consultation. You might consult, but then go ahead to make your decisions irrespective of the feedback that you have gotten. So I think the response from these industry groups just suggests to me, and I was part of the process. I was a member of the Fiscal Policy Reform Committee that usually drafts the Finance Act, and we had made certain comments and said, look, why don't we look at certain things or give it more time? So this just buttresses the fact that maybe the outgone government should have done a bit of more consultation or should have proceeded with a little less haste. Now, with the issue of loss of revenue, I think it is a double-edged sword. The first thing is, yes, you're absolutely right. Government needs to raise revenue, but you cannot kill businesses because you want to raise revenue. And also, businesses must thrive first before they can pay, taxes or revenue to government. So I think what the government is saying is, look, we've removed subsidy, we've done a few things here. So like the president said during his campaigns, they want at least to allow people to breathe. So I think it's also government saying, look, we're going to give you back something. They're not even saying they're not going to impose those taxes anymore. They're not saying they are withdrawing them. What they've simply said is let's pause. So what the government has done is to say, look, the Finance Act will not take effect immediately. It will give about 90 days or so before it begins to take effect with respect to specific issues in the Finance Act. So I think it also shows that the government is listening. And for someone like me who's an industry practitioner, I believe that clients and companies in the manufacturing sector, the telecom sector, they'll be very pleased with this. And I think that's the feedback we've gotten so far.
All right. Now, many Nigerians do not really understand or know what an excise tax is or can be. So I'd like you to just briefly explain that to us and how it affects Nigerians and, of course, businesses.
Very good. So, again, you see, this is the importance of whether you want to call it stakeholder engagement, taxpayer enlightenment, and all of that. So excise is actually a tax on production. How it operates is that, it's usually used to, manage the consumption or production of certain items, whether you call them luxury or sin taxes and all of that. Typically in Nigeria, what we've had is excise on alcoholic products, tobacco, and the rest. So when you produce, say, a bottle of beer or a pack of cigarettes, there's a tax, an excise tax on each pack that you produce. And it is levied at the point of production. Once you produce it, you pay the excise. Now, typically, of course, as a company or as a business, you will shift the cost of that excise to the ultimate consumer. But the difference between excise, for example, and VAT is that VAT is on consumption, but excise is on production. So once you produce, you pay it. Now, what has happened in the last 2-3 years is that the coverage of excise was then expanded to non-alcoholic products, soft drinks, carbonated drinks, and all of that. And then also to telecoms services, which is one of the major areas of GDP growth in Nigeria. And if you recall, the past Minister of Communications and Digital Economy had said, look, he didn't think it was proper to impose excise on telecommunication services at the time it was done. So that's how excise operates. Once you produce an item or a service, you will charge the excise on it, or rather you pay the excise on it, and then you shift the cost of that thing to your consumer. So ultimately, it's an added cost of production to the companies. And so that is why, again, it is important, that there's this pause so that people even understand, if even the taxes are still going to come in or at the rates at which they've been imposed, there is need for people to be able to adjust either their consumption habits or even the companies to say, look, how can we lower the cost of production so that we can still sell these items to Nigerians at a price at which Nigerians can afford them.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael, for talking to us.
Thank you, my pleasure.